having to delay it to next month.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, call this meeting to order at 4:32.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Jason. Here. Christine.
Here.
David.
With online.
And he had expressed before that he wouldn't be here, but I think he's listening, but unless he can go back forward. But
Yeah. Okay. Steve. Here. So I motion that we accept David Pearson's absence as excused.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay.
Sidebar, do you want to, because we could do it as an addition to the agenda too.
I would say probably as an addition to the agenda for a reconsideration. We can have that.
Yep. So we'll have to accept them as presented, and then go back in.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're gonna.
So I motion that we have an addition to tonight's agenda. We'll put it under district business,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, I think that would probably.
Okay.
Want to make it new item 2, or do you want to add it to the end?
Well, if we do that too, we'll have to change all the rest, so let's make it 7.
Okay. Okay, so.
Okay, do we have a second? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Yeah, that's the.
I have another.
Yeah.
Change the agenda, if we can move 2 and 3 to 8 and 9, so that the public doesn't have to wait on
I
that.
agree. Well,
Just do that
Yeah,
at the end of the meeting.
Elect if they want to.
Yeah.
Okay, so 2 and 3 will.
8 and 9.
The other numbers will go away, they'll just follow 7, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah, so they'll follow, 2 and 3 will follow 7.
yeah. Okay. So, actually,
Motion to that?
yeah, I think they need to change, yeah, we need to.
I'll make a motion to change number 2 and number 3 to the end of the agenda.
I second that. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, conflicts of interest, if any board member has a conflict of interest regarding any business that may take place at tonight's meeting, please make notification now. I don't. Okay, correspondence.
And then from staff.
Public comment. Any member of the public that would like to speak at tonight's meeting, this would be the time. And we do, if there's numerous ones, we can restrict the public comment to 3 minutes per person. Anyone wanting to speak? Okay. Yes, for presentations.
None scheduled, 9:00.
Regular board meeting minutes from February 8th, 2023.
And I did, let me see the handout, I did miss when I was making the corrections, I forgot to include the special meeting minutes back into this, yes, the amended packet, I made the corrections on it. So it is, yeah, so this is the minutes would be included in that consent agenda.
And then we'll have to approve this special meeting minutes the second time.
We should be able to add them in the consent, right? But the minutes won't change. We'll just, it'll be
Okay.
reflected in these
Okay.
minutes that we reconsidered and made a new motion.
Yeah.
So it'll capture the minutes.
Do I have a motion to approve the regular board meeting minutes from February 8th?
It's the consent agenda, so if you want to take it as.
You want to just
consent,
do the whole ball of wax?
Yeah,
Okay, that works for me too.
unless somebody decides to move forward.
If no one wants to pull it, then I motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Oh, I second, sorry.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Okay, chief's report.
Okay, hit on a few items real quick here for you. We did hire 2 new firefighters. I think he's hiding upstairs right now on us because the shy guy. So we got 2 new firefighters that started with us last week, did a week of onboard training. Felix Sykes, who's on shift today, and Rusty Barnes. So they went through week of onboard training and then started on shift this week. So glad to have them on board. We have 2 additional offers that were out and accepted, and those 2 will be starting on Monday for a 2-week in-house academy before we go back. Then go to one after that. So that'll get us to full staff. End of the latter part of February. So on February 23rd, we did submit the Department of Fire Prevention and Control of Firefighter Safety and Disease Prevention Grant. So we'll fund up to $20,000 for safety. So ours was just under a hair under $20,000, and it would be for the NFPA 1582 baseline physical screening and vaccinations for all of our shift personnel. So it would cover just enough to cover 22 people for doing that. And then if we have to they do vaccination checks and titers, and if we have to do them, then there's a little extra charge. That's factored in that whole thing. So we may not have to use all of it if we don't have to do all the vaccinations. But it's a pretty quick turnaround on that one. It's fully funded, so there's no matching portion to that. The review process kicks off. It's either this week or next, and then the decisions will be done by mid to late March. And you'll get notified of that, and then it's about 2 months on a funding time from that. So for that to happen. So keep our fingers crossed. Hopefully we can get placed on that. We do have I have a meeting tomorrow afternoon. Captain Pettit and town staff are meeting with the ISO inspector. So our last one was done in 2016, and they reached out to us. They're going to come. We'll meet with them tomorrow and go over some of the stuff that they sent to us ahead of time to discuss, and then we'll kind of start gathering all the information they need to submit that back. There's only 1 in the state now. There's 2. There's only 1 in the state, so they've had work in the western area. Now they're over in this area. They're working PFA right now, and so they're going to work with ours at the same time. So we'll have some updates once I meet with them and kind of understand the timing process of what that looks like. The last one was the review period was in 2015, and then it was signed and effective in 2016. I've been continuing to work closely with the DEO, our designated election official, just to monitor the progress of the elections. I'll give a little more of an update when we get into that, just business as far as where we stand on that. So we have been just really continuing to watch and monitor the progress of our financials, just really prioritizing the last bit of our purchases. We're anticipating our next tax dump usually comes on the 10th. So with it being on a Friday, we got fingers crossed that it's happening Friday, not on Monday, but we did do, and financial just recently did another second draw against the OC, which we're really hoping that's gonna be the last one we have to do for the year, good place for that, so. And then, continuing to work with JVG staff, as we get ready for the audit. So working on kind of the audit prep work from that. So anticipating field time is late April to early May. So we don't have a set specific date yet, but that's kind of the time frame that they're targeting. And then, we're working through the last of the, position evaluations. So in the budget for this year, we had appropriated $40,000 in personnel costs for administrative help. So I've been holding off on doing anything just to make sure that we're staying on progress to that. 1, 2, to make sure that we've got our funding in place before we do that. But we have a part-time limited term administrative position, so general support specialist, which would be able to do some of that. So looking at just based on experience, timing, trying to kind of factor in approximately budgeting towards about 20,000 of that. So we're not budgeting for the full amount and just going to see what the work that we need from that. So we're going to hopefully float that position here real soon and give it a few weeks to see what the interest looks like and see what kind of experience and stuff we can get, kind of figure out hours and be probably a couple days a week part-time or that type of thing, just to kind of help, and then hopefully help with doing some of this type of stuff and prep for this and helping do a better job of minutes than I do most of the time, but you know, I work on it. So and then the other thing that we've been evaluating with is we have one lieutenant that's been working in an administrative position for us, rolled in from the line, and we're really looking at the skill set, the chain of command, and the amount of officers that I have working under me, and looking at elevating that one additional lieutenant position internally to a captain's level position. So a little bit more level of responsibility, has a little bit more pay that would go along with that, but additional certifications and qualifications that would tie into that. It would allow ability to kind of have that who's in charge if I'm not here, Captain Pettit, that would give us 2 captains on that and be able to have some of that
would
chain
you
of
be able
command.
to allocate some of your day-to-day things? to that
So
person then?
so Lieutenant Delps, who's been in that position, is doing a lot of that now. So doing some training stuff, doing certification, tracking and maintenance, dealing with training calendar issues and that kind of thing. So they'd be doing that. It would actually give another level of authority to that position, kind of in the chain of command part. And then so he has taken over quite a bit, which has been helpful, but the administrative work that we're looking at doing would also be something to give some of that to that part. So just making sure that we've got the right amount of money budgeted for the positions, that we're not pushing us into something that we can't afford to do right now. So that's why I'm kind of holding off on that and just looking, making sure the timing is right for that. But we did budget 40,000 into the year for that, so we're not looking at spending anywhere near all of it for this year, but it would really depend on the work product and the ability to get somebody that fits that, and then we can continue to track with a part-time position how much hours we're using towards that, and then if it makes sense to give them more hours, if they can pick up, if they have the capacity to do higher level works. That's all I have. Unless there's any questions from there.
No, just a quick question in terms of the audit. Certainly, it's not getting easier, but it's getting more streamlined as you're getting farther into it than when you first, right?
Yes, I mean, Mr. President, members of the board, yeah, so obviously as we're the first year audit, we weren't involved
Right.
in the finances for that entire year. Actually, we're involved in that year at all. So it's obviously trying to figure out what somebody else has done and work through some accounting issues. Now it's a much simpler process, and in fact that, you know, we've also been on the bill.com the entire time, so that'll allow the audit firm to have access to that, so they can pull disbursements and things. So it'll be a much smoother process this year than definitely last year.
Perfect, thanks.
You're supposed to stay up here.
Yeah, you're. I would help me out.
Yeah.
So we'll officially move on to district business, and first up is our monthly financial report.
All right, thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. It's good to be here again in person. I mean, I know it works when we're remote, but it's much easier in person. So you do have the February financial report in your packet, and kind of starting on page 5. We brought in a total of 67,000 in revenue for the month of February. The majority of, actually pretty much all of that, was property tax collection. We took in $100 worth of service fees, but, really all of that revenue was tax collection. We were under what we budgeted for the month by $2,900, and it was those non-levy revenues that threw off that variance. On the expense side, we're at $190,000 in total expenses for the month of February. We were under budget by $33,000. As the chief kind of mentioned, under personnel, there were 4 vacancies this year, starting in January. So we were seeing some significant savings on the personnel side. But if you do look at the detailed reports, you may see that overtime is over budget, but the savings we're having on not having this position filled is offsetting that. And so ultimately, we're seeing a much greater savings with the pay and benefits for full-time than we are seeing the usage on the overtime side. I will point out one other thing on the expenses. You may notice workers' comp was over budget. That was due to not only our regular workers' comp payment, but essentially the deductible that we pay on claims. Year to date, we're at $99,700 in total revenue. We are under budget by $24,000. Property tax collection is the primary driver of that. We're about $28,000 behind where we anticipate. As Chief mentioned, we should be seeing our first half taxes, large chunk of first half taxes come in, hopefully this week. On the expenses, we're at $375,000 in expenses through January and February, which is under budget by $72,000. One thing I do want to point out to the board, if we go back to kind of page 2, and kind of up towards the top there, we've got our total cash general fund. And you know, essentially, we ended the month in the general fund with actually only about $21,000 in the bank. Compared to last year, we had $28,000. So we're actually down by about $7,000. But if we go to page 3 at the top, you'll see the FMBO line of credit. Last year at this time, we were on the line of credit by $455,000. This year, at the end of February, we're only on the line of credit by $150,000. So we're actually to the positive, really, by almost $300,000. The only other thing I want to kind of mention on the line of credit piece is kind of, you know, what Chief mentioned is, I don't know if anybody's heard this, but the Fed's raising interest rates, and has been for a while. We're up at about 8.5% on the line of credit. So as soon as that money hits, we'll pay off the line of credit to stop the bleed on the interest expense side. And then we don't anticipate needing the line of credit again for the rest of the year. So knock on wood, the only thing that may impact that I could foresee is if we get a heavy wildland deployment request and we're having to deploy on wildland, expend the wages for those wildland deployments and the overtime for backfill. Right, exactly. We may have to front that. Again, with the I'm not by any means a wildland expert, but what we're hearing at other clients and stuff is with the snowfall and the moisture, there's not an anticipation of big deployments. So we doubt we'll see that, but that may be the one reason why we may have to borrow is if we have a big wildland system. And then the last piece on the finances I want to talk to the board about, just as in whole, we've been having some discussion with the board member on the format of the financial reports. And so what we felt was because the financial reports are the district reports, therefore the fire chief to manage the budget and for the board to oversee the finances. We felt it was appropriate to have a conversation with the board and then discuss overall discussion with the board on what's the overall preference. And so kind of the request is to move our reporting from reporting the month after to basically reporting 2 months after the month. And what that would do is allow us to do essentially true full accrual accounting on the monthly financials. And so what we do now is an accrual basis of accounting. But what we do for the majority of our clients, actually all of our clients, is we have a cutoff date. And with the time of our board meeting, our cutoff date is relatively short. We usually go to like the 10th or the 15th of the month with our clients on the cutoff date. Ours is up towards the beginning because of obviously we need to get the reports done and out. So what happens is we have obviously utilities and certain bills come in that, yes, they were for February, but we may not actually get that bill till March 10th, March 15th, and so on. The way we typically handle that is that when bills come in after our cutoff date, they're just reported in the next month financial report. So essentially you may have some February bills in the March financials. And so what that does is allows the board to get timely reports, but then we're not really truly doing by the definition of accrual accounting, because we're recording some expenses that have occurred in another period.
But we get a more accurate it would be more accurate to us because it would include everything. There wouldn't be any overlap.
So it'd be more timely.
Yeah.
And so what, again, and so the kind of the pros are we get a true full picture of this is what was spent in January now, or February, or whatever month. Now, the cons to that is if we want to go to a true full accrual, the question becomes is at what level of detail do we want to get to? Do we want our $45 a month water bill that is actually dated from January 10th to February 20th, whatever, to be split in half? Do we want supplies to be recorded on a monthly basis on a burn rate? And so we really look at materiality when we look at accounting, we look at accrual versus cash. And so a good example of materiality is like our fixed assets. Chief might buy a computer for $500 or $1,000, but we're going to just expense it when it was purchased. Now its useful life may be greater than that 1 month, but we realized, hey, anything under $5,000 we're going to expense in that period and be done with it. If it's more than $5,000, then we'll depreciate over its useful life. And so I guess what we're trying to get to is JBG, so we have roughly 30 clients and it's about 300 million in budgets. And what we do is we set a cutoff date and we prepare the reports the following month based on that cutoff date. And so while we may have some invoices for February actually show up in the March financials, overall it's materially correct. Your payroll on the February report is what your payroll was. All your large expenditures in February are on the February report. But you may have a water bill, you may have a few bills that kind of trickled in a little later that are actually going to show up in March now. Or do you want us to kind of have a more loose cutoff date? And then basically in March, we would be presenting the January financials.
Well, it sounds like that would be more useful to us and more efficient for you.
It would be less,
Well, the other way, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
We'd be able to know everything that, because right now we don't know if there is something that collapsed, whereas with that we would.
well, you would, yeah. So say this February one now is accurate up to year to date, shy of maybe the last week and a half or so.
Yeah, and that's that period too.
Well, then in March, it would be
Yeah.
up to date with the last,
Yeah.
2 weeks of week and a half of bills, maybe they came into there.
Yeah.
The part that I have the most concern about really in seeing them later is I'm not getting things that relate to the biggest piece, like a really good example right now is our overtime. So watching that kind of like a hawk looking, going, we know we're down people, but we're watching overtime and trying to get a read on where are things going to balance out, right? Once we know we have full staff, the overtime is going to go down, personnel costs are going to go up, and the associated personnel costs, but making sure that when we hit the end, that we're staying on track and trending on those. Those are the things I need to make a decision on quicker than, kind of running reports and getting pieces of reports. The other part that we struggle with, because as we started to have these discussions and really looking at bills, we have the vast majority of our bills aren't on a calendar month. They straddle months, right? So the reporting period starts at a certain date of the month, like we talked about, the 10th of the month, and ends the 9th of the next month. And so some things are for things that we used during that time. So did we use electricity? Did we use natural gas? Did we use station supplies during that time? Or did we buy them and now we're going to use them going forward? And so, where's the most proper place for me? The material changes. I want to know when I ordered it and when I paid the invoice, I want to see it then show up into the financials and know that there might be a slight lapse in some of those things, but I know that from watching the bills, I know some of the purchases we made, they're going to reflect in the next month and as I get the next month. So as we talked about last month, a lot of things weren't in January, just the way January fell. but knowing what we spent and knowing by the time February and March catch up, all that, most of that stuff's gonna be in there for us. And
And where wild card is the personnel costs.
so that's more of that part. So, and most of it, I think when we start to, and not to me if I'm speaking out, but most of the time, I would say personnel costs are gonna be relatively flat. They're
Except
easier,
for the overtime.
correct. They're easier for us to plan and budget. You know, when we say most stuff that's on there, and I would say probably to the 90th percentile of items, our budget, when we make the budget, it's a, you know, educated
Pretty reliable.
guess. Well, it's an educated guess on what we think we're gonna do for the year. But then how we divide it up to say, are we staying on budget? Well, the t-shirts are a really good example. We just had to have, it was time to have another batch of silk screening things done. So we spent $1,400 on t-shirts that's gonna last us for 8 months, but our uniform budget is $7,000 divided by 12, right? So it's spread across. So when I spend that, unless I wait to spend it really late, we're gonna be under budget, and then all of a sudden we'll spend $1,400. But so some of those kind of things are, I'm not gonna spend 1/12 of things each month.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna kind of plan on some bigger purchases. We'll be under budget, and then we make that purchase. Then we might show over budget, but I know I'm in trying to stay with as close to current financials and getting the financials as current as possible. I'm gonna continue to just make those decisions on, okay, we're not gonna be able to make that purchase, or this thing popped up and now we're gonna have to make a decision on what are we gonna change to be able to accommodate that truck repair or an extra set of turnouts or something that we hadn't planned on, where we make that adjustment.
So, you have the ability to run reports on your own, correct?
I can run reports down.
So these reports are pretty much more for the public and for the board, because you can run reports at any time and make sure that you are looking at your budget. So for board perspective, I want to see utilities, one utility per month for water, you know, type thing. So that I know, because right now we have 2 in December, and that's the issue is December is a heavy month, that has 2 months worth of.
Well, and those are working on cleanup through that stuff. So from the budget cleanup or for the audit cleanup.
Right, things that we pay in January, but we're for December, we have to put in December in the 13th month. So that just makes it heavy, and so then it's hard to see, are we gonna go over budget by the end of the year? I don't know, because it's 2 months worth of expenses. I would prefer it to be the accrual base for the board and the public to be 2 months behind, but then we have, here's what we spent in January, everything that was accrued in January. That would be my preference, and then you run reports at any time to see where we're at for what you need to do. You don't have to wait for the board report. Would that work for you?
Well, I think the part that gets at that is that this is my financial director partnership that I have here, which helps make those decisions. So me just simply running reports to try to, you know, decipher some of those. I mean, I keep an eye on that, but this is kind of who works with. So however we do that, it either becomes duplication of effort or additional work that's either done on my part or done on their part. And I think what's nice about this is the work that we do to get the bills in and get that stuff cleaned up. And then as they produce those reports that are really useful for me in doing what I need to do. And I recognize that, you know, you say, well, it's really more for the public and for the others. It's, you know, I think our past history shows it's very material for me and for the board to know how we're trending and then see if there's any anomalies that are coming up. The part that I do understand is that that short of, as you discussed, the December into January and that first start, that stuff that carries over. But as we move forward, each one is the year to date that continues to carry over as those things get loaded for me. So again, as we look at how are we going to code these, I started looking at, okay, as I'm running through bow.com, I'm like, which end does this go? I mean, it literally have to sit and make an educated determination or kind of write a rule for is this electrical bill am I gonna divide it over how many days of the month times the total bill, or in January and in February? And are we gonna, in bill.com, are we gonna load it that way, but then they're gonna have to make the edits and touch everything in QuickBooks to carry those across the month? Or are we just saying in a lot of those things, we're gonna record them in the month that we pay? Because some stuff we do pay in advance for, the tower rental of iHeartMedia tower. We pay that in whatever it is, this 10th of the month or something, but that's going to be for that month. But other stuff is in the arrears that we used. But we also, as I shared, we have a bulk of stuff that is, we buy it, and then when do we use it? If we're saying we're gonna charge it when we used it, station supplies, all those type of things, batteries, toilet paper, paper towels, coffee, or we're gonna buy a month or two supply. Do we accrue part of it, or do we just say this is how it works? We're gonna charge that when we actually spent the money, when we actually paid the bill. That's when we're gonna charge them.
And I think, Chief, and I think that's really kind of what the question comes down to is obviously with accounting systems, we want them to be accurate, we want them to be timely, and we want them to be efficient. And so that's the question is there value overall for the board to ensure that, we've captured all the bills in that month, and delay the reporting by a month. And then also from the chief's perspective, ensuring that we're getting reporting to the chief. So I would just kind of lay it out there. So the pro is, we've got we're spending about $1,500 to $3,000 a month in utilities. So that's, I'm just using that as the example used. So we may have January, what may be a light month in utilities, but then February under our current model will be heavier because we may have some bills that kind of came in and because we're also worried about year-end accruals. And then we just move forward on a monthly basis, and for the most part, everything will come in monthly, which it does. And then that's the way we've done it. That's the way we've scoped it out. That's the way, we have our cutoff date, and any bills that come in after the cutoff date will be recorded in the month that they come in on.
And just add to that, also from a transparency standpoint, it's captured in the year to date.
Yes.
So it's not like we miss it and no one gets to see it. You get to see it in the year to date. So the public see it.
That's true, yeah.
Or we kind of change methodology, and the board's like, no, we want to see the full accrual for that month. We delay the reporting for a month, and it may not be a lot of extra work, but there will be extra work to change the process. And so it's kind of a benefit, pros and cons. Do the pros outweigh the cons? And so obviously our professional opinion is it doesn't, but they're not our financial reports, they're your financial reports. And so that's why we're bringing the question to the board, and happy to kind of at the board's pleasure here.
Or is it a case where what the board requires and what the chief requires is totally opposite things? I feel we need those hard numbers, and if it takes a month delay for us to have the real numbers. But yet the chief is needing the numbers more in real time on a day-to-day basis or week-to-week basis. So.
You can cash and accrual report.
Right, and so and that's what I mean is it will be more work, and I just want the board to be aware of that it is a change in scope. From the way
you do it for the other districts.
right, it may not be a lot, but I mean there is that high potential, and I don't want to go forward and not be fully transparent with the board either.
Can you teach? Right, that's what you said, change of scope, that's what you meant. Can you teach chief how to run the report, so he can look at it, on the timely basis that he needs?
Can I just add one thing to that? He's not a finance director, he's a fire chief.
Right.
Yeah.
And given the situation you brought us in to do, I just want to make sure that's clear.
So you think it's better? for
It's
him
what we
to-
do. With a finance director, for those districts,
We're
he's a fire chief.
he's to oversee the board, not, take, dissect.
The department, the operations. of the-
Exactly.
And your chief, you're actually very lucky, your chief's very good at doing
Yeah,
these
so I
things.
think if we bog it down more, then I want it to be the most efficient And we're always gonna be transparent, like I said, it's always gonna be there, the public can always see it. You know, so I don't mean this to sound bad, I would rather have it be more efficient for chief than I would. That's
So,
my
and I'll speak just personally for me, I would rather have that too.
number
I
one.
want to make I want to try to make the best decisions and, you know, without delaying or not having a second guess that I, you know,
Yeah.
maybe what I did.
And it's not like we're hiding anything, because everything could be, seeing it may be a month late for somebody, but I can't imagine that's a big concern. My number one concern is that it's most efficient.
Can I make a compromise? If we do the cash basis in December, can we do a 13th month report for all the things that came in 2000, the following year?
Yeah, our process, obviously, I'll just kind of take a step back here. So the way we handle the financial reporting on a monthly and an annual basis is essentially we do our best to record the expenses in the period in which they are incurred. So we don't calculate payroll. If the payroll lapses over a month, we don't calculate it out by the number of days in the monthly reports. We make sure it gets recorded in the month that the payroll hits the bank. All of the expenses, we try to make sure if we're invoiced in that month, that expense is reflected in those monthly financials. There are times where, like we said, a utility bill or a fuel bill may come in a few days or weeks after the cutoff, and we've prepared the reports. So that doesn't mean that expense doesn't get reported. It just means it's not going to be reported now until you get your February financial report.
I can't see any expense that would be so big that would warrant changing our whole system, because it's pretty predictable.
75% of our expenses, of our budgeted expenses, are personnel.
So there, I don't know why we would want to drastically change it based on something that's pretty damn predictable, and I
But-
can't.
The reason is because in December, we don't get the complete December
For
numbers.
the end of the year, that's the
Yeah.
only.
And so to Director Gator's point, and look, so as I finish, so this is what we do on a monthly basis. When we get to year end though, we have, obviously, we have our hard close date for the monthly financial report for the board. But then we go into kind of we call it our audit prep. But at that point, we're now looking for subsequent disbursements that are truly 2022 expenses. And so we make sure those get recorded back to 2022. We actually then calculate payroll out to the number of days. And we make an adjustment for payroll. Again, it goes by materiality. We're not going to take the water bill and divide it up by the number of days, because it's a $100 water bill. But our payroll expense, which is our most significant expense, we are going to break that out and calculate it down to the number of days. So we make that full accrual. We make sure any material expenses that came through, we typically have a threshold of about $1,500 for most of our clients on subsequent disbursements. Make sure those get recorded back. And then we have and then we make all of the accrual adjustments that we make for, receivables and liabilities. And then we have our full accrual trial balance. And I think that's what you're asking for, and you're trying to get to, is can that then be provided to the board once that is prepared? And I think that is, we have to do that for the audit. So that is something very easy for us to provide a copy of that to the board. And
Is that what you're saying?
well, we do the trial balance, we could run a P&L.
A year to date, including the new numbers after the report was given to us. Okay. I feel like I didn't get that, so I don't know what the numbers were for last year.
And we're still working on it too, so that's why I don't want to give it to you right now, and then, because I know like a lot of the expenses have been back accrued, but I don't know if our prepaid expenses have been recorded out. I don't believe the full accrual for payroll has been done yet.
Okay.
So after we kind of have the financials ready for the auditors, we can, in that month's packet, which should be, as Chief mentioned, we're doing audit prep April with field work in May. So probably by definitely the May board meeting, we kind of have that full true up on how the year truly ended. Would that work?
That's so late.
I guess my question back is how does that impact the board today?
To see how we ended up for what we budgeted versus what we spent in 2022. We still don't even know.
We really wouldn't need to know that till we got it for the next budget, which wouldn't be for 3 months after the audit, because we're not gonna change our, I mean, we have a budget for this year, it's not gonna change.
True.
So the information, to me, sounds like as long as we have it for time to prepare for the next budget is
For the
the
following
most
budget.
important thing.
And I don't think it's fair to say that you don't know how you ended the year, because you do know how you ended the
Pretty darn, yeah, we know.
year. You don't have a full accrual accounting of how you ended the year. And typically, government works on the modified accrual basis for purposes of monitoring budget performance, which is what you have received in your monthly packets.
But there were added expenses after our December financial report.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also gonna be depreciation expenses added to the financials. There's gonna be accrual of payroll. There's gonna be accrual of any end leave liability changes. But those are more year-end accruals and not a true performance indicator on how you guys did from a budget to actual.
Oh, so you're saying from a cash perspective, we know how we did.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah.
But to the budget perspective, because those accrual ones are part of the budget, right?
It will have impacts on budget and line items, but you do know where you stand from a cash standpoint.
That should be.
If we have it done sooner, I will make sure it gets you sooner.
With no changes.
And,
Yes,
yeah.
with no changes stuff.
Thank you.
and there's a couple other things I'll add before you guys finish up too, just as you go through the numbers, we, just as kind of as a reminder, we changed, our chart of accounts at the end of last year for this year's budget. So some of the category names, and we changed the 4-digit categories in here. What we were trying to do was take our first step at having items fall in categories that seemed logical, more logical categories. And so we did that. But part of what that meant that we had to do was try to look at our historical past expenditures, see what we spent things on, and then figure out what category they're going to be in now. But it also meant that we had to do our budget based off of that. So for instance, we talked about before, the Wex Bank card, or what's another good one? The Verizon phone, like, right? Which category did we call those when we did the budget? So the other thing is we have different people within the organization that have the other responsibilities for ordering and purchasing things. So we've been working off of the old 6-digit code and transferring things over to the new 4-digit code and making sure things are coded right. So we've caught some in Bill.com, some have slipped through, but there's some things that I have a list of a few things that I'm going to be working with Sarah, just stuff that got coded in January or maybe got coded, and then we corrected them in February. They're going forward, but there's a couple things that fall in some other line items that we'll be doing the last little bit of cleanup to make sure that we're coding those as we go forward into the category that we loaded the budget to. So nothing material more than, 100 here or 35 there or that type of thing, but it's a learning process for us internally, the other folks approving that. And then there's also kind of a learning process in Bill.com as we load some of those recurring ones. The next times that they go through, they'll naturally want to fall into that chart code as opposed to the one. I did it with, we initially had set bunker gear as a capital purchase because it was a capital, we called it a capital on our old budgeting process. But bunker gear in itself, while the components as a whole are expensive, the ensemble as a whole is expensive, but the individual items of that don't really match what we would call capital. So we changed that. We had a line item in there in the Bill.com that says capital, but we made a new line item that's PPE that doesn't fall under capital. So we made our first purchase of some stuff and I added it to the capital one, but that's not where we loaded the budget. We loaded it in the PPE one. So I have to sort a couple of those things out. So there'll be a little bit of cleanup over the next month or so. That'll clean up some of the last little things. And I think as we go forward, we'll have items that shouldn't fall into those categories going forward.
I got a question, the Lamar County impact fees, is that gonna be part of the audit? cleanup?
So that's a good point. I was gonna put it in my notes. So I worked with the town for the last couple months at the very tail of the year and first of this month to get their records on what they've waived versus what we have on record of what we've waived, and did a comparison to all that, put that all together. I shared it with JG and Sarah. And kind of got a rough number of, I think, where we stand on the fees that have been waived so far, and then the the installment payments, we've made 2 of the 4 installment payments towards that. So I think we're really close to those. We've just done some cross auditing on that. We want to put eyes on it and make sure that we know that right. And then, but with the audit, that's when it'll get adjusted and cleaned up going forward after you do the audit.
That's on here. Yep.
In the last audit, the, shared in one meeting before, we did the purchase of the property underwent 3 different amendments before the final purchase. And so based off timing, it switched some of the things around. So in the audit, what they had was the record of the very first purchase agreement. So they showed 4 installments of like 53,400, but it was actually 4 installments of 69,500. So in when you look at last year's audit, it shows those numbers, but we've got everything put together so that when we're reporting for this year's audit, they capture that and they capture all those numbers so that it accounts correctly. So that will get updated once we know for sure that's where that is, and then we'll have that number going forward.
We reported out from a budget standpoint, we have 69,500 budget.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns? Okay,
District board expenses. Oh, I'm sorry, no, never mind, there's nothing in there. So the payroll processing fee is over budget, and that's, I don't know, it's a percentage, I don't know. Do you think it's gonna go over budget for the year? That's Paylocity.
I don't anticipate that. I'll have to look into what specifically, was the overage for February. Kind of looking at it, I'll have to dive into that one a little bit more. I don't anticipate, because it should be a set amount each month.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if there was some other fee or something like that that hit in there.
And then the only other thing is the cash flow report showing in December that our cash position will be 62,000. And then I just added up, our disbursements for this year, January and February, and it came to 364,000. So it looks like if that is true, we'll have to take out another LLC.
Yeah, and so, and good point right on the cash flow. You know, what we've got in there, in the cash flow for December, those total disbursements also include both the revenue and the disbursements include the wildland revenue and expense component. Obviously, we didn't want to have that early on and keep, you know, we keep saying we're over budget or under budget because of wildland. But then the 547,000 down there would be essentially if we paid off the tax abatements. So, so if that doesn't occur, I don't anticipate the board's gonna do that. We're gonna be in a much better year-end cash position, but we've reflected it here because it's still, it's not like a liability, like a lease purchase debt where there's a structured payment plan for it. It's kind of a liability of the organization that's really due. We need to pay it. So we don't want it to reflect that we got more free cash than we really have. But ultimately, you're right. We'd use that. We probably wouldn't pay that money off at year end because we'd want to use it for cash flow purposes, and not have to draw on the line of credit. Hopefully.
Yeah.
That's it.
And in our schedule, what we had was for 2024 would be doing the mill levy adjustment. So a lower collection in 24 to do the tax abatement, paying back through the levies, collecting less and putting that back to that. So that's what so this reflects if we paid it all off, but so the plan, at least for our plan, how we went forward was the slight payment back in 22, slight payment back this year in 23, and then the adjustment in 24 to whatever that would be to look at that amount that we have left. And if we're in that position to be able then to pay all that back in 24, and that's what the plan would be through that adjusted mill levy.
Well, a lot of it may depend on assessments.
Right.
What.
Right.
Well, so we did get some, I mean, we heard some good news from the Wellington County Assessor. Preliminary numbers for county-wide was pretty significant increase. I was hearing like 20% numbers being thrown around, so. I'm sorry, for Weld and Larimer, like both. So, I mean, this region as a whole We should see some good numbers, it's not official till it's official. But realize though, then we'll have those for 2 years and then we'll be reassessed. And so that's when the question comes in is, what does the market look like now based on the Fed rate
Yeah,
increases?
we'll have that 2-year window to look at.
Correct.
And if it is favorable, then it put us in a good position.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, I appreciate, I think we're in a good financial position, and I would love to see that we don't take out enough credit next year.
Yes.
If we can, and that would be great, to strive for, so thank you.
Our goal.
That's all I got.
Thank you.
Okay, no further business or questions under monthly financial report. I motion that we approve the monthly financial report as presented.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, we moved to executive session, so following your agenda. We'll skip right over to item number 4.
So I'll make a, just a quick, share with the board a quick, update on that. I included the really the one edit that was in the bylaws, but there was 3 questions that were really brought up in the last meeting. One was the ICS training and or possibly the Special Districts Association training. Then the other question that was brought up was about like what happens if we don't get a quorum? What is there some direction if we don't have a quorum? And then the third question was, is there some direction on individual board members interacting with legal counsel versus the board as a whole? So what I did was, and I shared a few copies electronically, but then I just reached out to other special district fire agencies that are around us. So there's some copies that I'll give you just to look at. But basically, in a nutshell, on those 3 items, the ICS training or any other training, none of the samples that I got of anybody that sent have anything to do with any kind of training. So there's no training relative, there's nothing added into any of those. I didn't reach out to legal counsel to get an answer relative to what we had talked about, potentially like the ICS 10278 related to us having the ability to ask for federal grants, but nobody else has captured it in their bylaws. The other 2 items, there's nothing material in any of the other 2, in the other sample bylaws relative to quorum. It specifically states what a quorum is, and it specifically states you have to have a quorum to take action, but it doesn't talk about if you don't have a quorum, what can you do? If you don't have a quorum, you can't take action, so it would really be, I mean,
Well,
it would really be up to the chair to decide what to do,
part of
or
that
have discussion items that aren't action, right?
Part of that question was, at what point do you say you don't have a, and then say there's not a quorum?
And
Well, I
no,
mean,
nobody addresses that specifically in their bylaws that says you have a 15-minute window or 30-minute window or whatever. It's just, you have to have a quorum to take action. So in theory, if you didn't, you could, if you had discussion items, could you, like theory, go over those as long as you didn't
well,
take action?
that means you only have 2 people and would it be worth
Right.
time anyway? So
Right.
in that case, you just don't have a meeting.
So whether it's worth trying to come up with some verbiage into your bylaws, you could decide on that. And then the same thing about legal counsel. It doesn't direct anything there. The biggest language I think that most of them, and kind of take a look at some samples too, there was at least 3 of them that looked like the same legal counsel drafted them up because you could change the name and do the same thing. And so I think it's kind of a piece that you look at, well, there's probably some strength behind that and some history behind that does that. I think the biggest part of what it does in some of these is the sort of the preamble or the first few sections of them talk about reminding the board that there's not that individual board members don't have specific action. It's the board that has to do that, that the president is generally the clearinghouse for one-on-one activities, that kind of thing. But also that individual board members aren't restricted by way of, say, their their First Amendment rights, anything for having discussions, doing that thing, but it talks about it puts some framework around it, which is the similar things that we talk about training and what we want to do. Our council and our first new people got elected, put together a couple of documents that they share with all their boards and the do's and don'ts, the activities, and that kind of thing. And so some of the language that's in there looks like the same in some of those sample ones, looks like the same language that our legal counsel sends out. So it might warrant having some thoughts about, would that be stuff that want to be incorporated into our lives? So with that, I'll leave it to the board to decide what we want to do next going forward. And since it's still in a red line version, it's not ready for an action yet for you. And just as a reminder to the board, the way that you in previous, you have it set that in a final version, the board can take action on it in a single meeting. So you have a final version.
So starting with the first one, mentioned the name, are you guys?
And that is,
I don't know where you're going.
sorry, I know, so whether or not you want, so whether or not you would want to, so it's that 613 would be on page 26. So basically that's what it is. So whether or not you want that, you want it.
Well, we
And
can change it to encourage instead of will. If you want to leave it in, if you feel like it.
I mean, I said, I've got them all, so I don't know.
But
I mean, it's
for the
helpful.
Future people.
It's helpful. I think especially somebody who's not familiar with the service, I think it's extremely helpful, but I think you put encourage, probably not very many people will do it.
Oh, you weren't here. As a citizen, I took those and I feel like they weren't helpful. Sorry, last time, that's what I said. Because it's all about chain of command, which, we're not doing that. We're not incident commanders. So that's why I suggested the SBA, that's more board duties. So I didn't find it helpful, but
Yeah, well,
so just if, we have new people elected to the board who are citizens and don't have it, having to go through 8 hours.
Yeah.
To do something that is not really, effective for our job.
I guess all that I would say on it is just be prepared in the future if it ever comes up again. You know, with a federal grant for them to come in, that you need to think. Everybody has.
and that's where it
needs to be
came
certified.
from, if I recall, that was years ago. With the federal grant.
And I know, and that's what, as opposed to going for trying to seek other, professional legal advice on it, to save the funds on that, I started with other bylaws. And, whether we encourage them to it outside of the bylaws, in the samples that I have here, and I got a couple more emails over the last couple of days, that nobody has that, written in their bylaws. So just kind of leave it in.
And we hadn't until it came up,
Yeah.
and then.
Yeah, there was
the rest
no
of it.
I think that's just staff, so, according to the town, but none of the trustees have to do anything for when they get federal grants. It's just the staff that has to go through training and things like that. I would prefer to get rid of it, but if you, I'd be willing to compromise and say we can just encourage, but not to say.
Then I'd recommend that you make a motion.
Which one
Well,
would
we
you
can-
guys like? You just like encourage or get rid of?
And take it, you have to take out within 6 months of taking those office.
Oh.
I would remove that line and just start with directors. Yeah. Can't put a stipulation on it and then say,
Right.
but we're only encouraged, we're only encouraged.
wanna do,
I don't know if we need to do anything. 'cause
Yeah, I don't have any
we
suggested language to
I
change
don't
there.
think, I don't think we need to do anything. If we don't have a quorum, you got two people and you've
Yeah, I
got no
guess-
meeting.
Just, yeah, be a hard nosed at it and say at 4 o'clock, when the clock strikes 4, if you don't have 3 people sitting here, then.
Well, and even in that doesn't say the time, so that's, I think it's up to.
Well, and that's what the whole
Yeah.
question was. Do you wait 15 minutes? You know, do you wait 5 minutes? Do you wait 10 minutes before you finally pull the plug on it?
You're on time and they're sitting here.
they don't wanna say, maybe.
They want to get it.
And as I looked through on that, nobody had a hard designated time limit to do that.
Well, I don't know if we want to be putting in
I don't think
things
so
about
either.
times and specifics, because another board may think this is ridiculous and they have to change it all. So I think,
Yeah, and I guess, because I don't think you were at that meeting, Steve. For a change, I showed up on time and was sitting here by myself for
The two of you,
and then Jason showed it.
yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
right.
no,
it was the two of you, and then, yeah.
Yeah, it was the two of us.
And then-
Christine showed up.
No,
So, yeah, hard nosed, I could have been at 4 o'clock said, well, I'm the only one here. But as we waited, by a quarter after, we had four, yeah, here, so that's what kind of raised the question. Okay. Works for me. So we still need a motion back on that.
Well, we don't, I mean, it's
Yeah,
just that we're just doing red line, so
Okay.
if you'd like, I'll bring it back
That'll work fine.
with that language.
change with that.
That'll work.
And then, if there's nothing else, I'll just run through the president, or if there's anybody else that has anything else based off of what they see, then I'll plan on bringing back a final version that has that change in it. Other than that, it'll be what's presented here right now with that change for a, discussion and potential action. In April.
Move on then to employee handbook revisions.
Okay, so I went through, did my best to accept all of the proposed changes that were there that we discussed. And then start with the formatting. Some of it's going to change as I get to some of the rest of it because web page breaks and all those things happen. It was not happy with it. We're getting close. So, on page 34, that first part of the employee important notice stuff, there's one I missed, one of the WFPDs, but we'll catch that. So got that. And then, with some of the recommended changes to like EEOC and some of the definitions where Employers Council asked to put those at the back end. So I changed those and then adjusted all the table of contents and all the page numbers. So hopefully we'll be right. There's a couple items that I want to point out that we discussed, that I haven't finished the changes yet because as we discussed in, briefly at kind of the tail end of the meeting, relative to a couple of the benefit items. Highlighted them with everything else. Section. So section 5, it starts on page 67. And then carry over to 68. What we talked about in the last meeting was the desire to change our PTO leave, some of the language that they suggested was between PTO, it's confusing on whether it's sick leave or any reason that you want to use it. And what we've been trying to clean up with is give direction for, especially supervisors that have to approve leave requests. When somebody's asking for to use holiday leave or to just a general leave because they want to take time off, we have been approving one per shift. But if somebody's sick, then we're not going to tell people they've got to work for sick. But it makes it difficult for the officers to understand that. So looking at moving, and then on 68 has holidays, and we do those. So both of those we do as a dump, not on an accrual basis. And so it's a bit of a challenge for us on one end, but it also restricts us from being able to look at the ability to. There's a gray area when people start after the 1st of the year or the 1st of July. And we have, in the spirit of it, been trying to do it. We'll do an accrual of what that looks like, or do a prorated amount of that, and then give them that dump. But we're working on language to make it be an accrual based going forward. But we have done the dump already for January 1st for the PTO. So for that part, we've given all the employees that part already. The holiday, we break it into 2 dumps, so January 1st and July 1st. And so what I've been working on language wise is to make sure that we can write it such that we'll continue with the dump that we've already done for the year for those that have been given the leave. Because if we were to change it, some people might have used some of that leave already, and so generally put them in a negative balance if we tried to change that. If somebody say used part of their leave, but they haven't completely accrued it already. So I think it's better from a planning perspective to make the adjustment to the language that states what our intent is, that say as of January 1st, 2024, this is what we currently have, and as of January 21st, 2024, we're going to transition to an accrual basis for that. And then it would be captured in here as to what we already are doing, what we've already dumped, and then as of January 24, we would do that. And so looking at the same thing for the holidays is looking at an accrual based of that. And just from a little bit of background, I think I shared at the tail end of it. One of the things that in my understanding of how this came to be and how everything kind of got lumped into PTO really was more of a driver of our payroll system. So in using Intuit, we basically had 2 buckets that we could use: vacation and PTO. And that's all of that Intuit for a payroll system could do for us. So we kind of made our policies and did some of the things around that based on it was easier to do a dump. It was easier to put everything into one bucket for PTO, holiday, use it as you want. So we could save some for sick. So in the suggestions from Players Council was clean up the language a bit more to help identify what is sick and how sick leave is used. And then if you're going to use time that you want whenever you want, then maybe that should come out of a PTO and be added into, say, a vacation or some other accrual basis on that. And then the holiday being the same thing. So we dump holiday half and then dump holiday the other half of the year. So we'll be looking at doing something to do that on an accrual basis too. So as people come, and one of the things I'll use just as an example on the other side is that we've had some people come and then leave. We've given them the dump, and then they use their last little bit right before their separation. So even though we don't say that you have to stay the whole year to accrue this for the whole year, when you dump it on January 1st, it's yours to use on January 1st if you wish. So
The holiday, they can use it anytime they want. Don't have to do it for pieces.
correct. So for the line staff, they get 40 hours on January 1st, 40 hours on July 1st, but they have to use it or lose it. But the other problem is that the way our old payroll system worked was all in one bucket. There's really no way to delineate what are you using, and in an effort not to punish people and try to figure out what to use, we didn't have the delineations. So we move it to accrual basis. If we can separate those out to be separate things, our Paylocity payroll system should do that. We can then build our policies around that to talk about what the accrual rates are. And then we can use our scheduling system so that when people are calling in, if they're calling in sick, they're taking sick, if they're going to take a holiday day, they're going to use their holidays first so they don't lose any of those hours, then they can declare those. And then it gives the supervisors a little bit more direction on what are people requesting time. So it's only just because of the timing of working on the update to the handbook that's kind of throwing us off a little bit on cleaning some kind of language.
So you're going to say that the accrual basis starts today, January first of next year?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we want to add that language into that, so we'll probably capture some of this, but the other thing that we want to work off of is moving a sick, so PTO turning into a sick leave and then a holiday. But we also want to make sure we're not doing anything that reduces the amount of the accrual or the hours done. And looking at the ability based off an accrual basis to determine what the actual accrual rate is for employees. So that'll come, I'll work on the language in that to include it in with the next version that will come to you with a. Item. So those were the key items that were left over from what was redlined before that we agreed to accept and move in. And I'll add that language into there and then format it with so that it's in a format that can be for final review.
Is there something about vaccination?
About vaccinations, not that I don't believe so.
So you said we're talking about it.
Oh, yeah, so there's no requirement, so the NFPA 1582, which is the NFPA standard that covers firefighter health and safety. So there's a screening goes with that, and then the grant that they're giving has the ability to do titers or vaccinations. So if people have done their hepatitis B or they've done tetanus or done those things, they can do a check for their titer levels, and then they can give vaccinations if they want to give vaccinations. So that would be covered in that part of the grant. The benefit package that we offer through our health insurance for everybody, any of the routine type stuff like that, it's covered. It's just covered under a routine medicine, no deductible. To do any of those kind of
Is
things.
there a requirement by the district to? Oh. Yeah. And then, let's see here. Page 13 of,
Of the packet, of the handbook, actually.
Handbook, actually. Workplace anti-violence policy.
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm a pro Second Amendment, right? So the fact that they're not allowed to bring a weapon, open hearing. There are reasons. We're allowed to conceal carry, but not allowed to carry.
For a reason, I'm not sure. So I'm not sure if this was.
I would say we don't want the public to is carried. Pretty close to being an officer.
But what about other attestations? If we like to use or the law, that's the.
Order lock.
Well, I'm in agreement with you, but I don't know that there are many government places where you can take it. Or, I don't know.
Yeah, you never knows. It's just something I don't know.
Well, I appreciate it.
I don't know. It doesn't say conceal there, does it?
You're allowed to
Yeah.
conceal carry.
If you have that,
Well, now it's say if you really wanted it, you want to conceal it, that's the point of it. Conceal, but don't bring it. Carry. I hate to say it, our means really close to. And I would hate to be firefighter, look like.
Yeah.
Yes, but yeah. I'm not the one that's gonna be shooting at other people.
so I will bring back that finalized version for consideration of the next.
Any other questions or discussions on the employee handbook? Okay, move on to update on board election process.
So just probably a brief update. I've been, the 24th was when the self-nomination period closed. So. So the DEO did, get back to me with the 4 candidates. The DEO connected with, no, thanks, thankfully, did, schedule and hold the random ballot draw via, virtual Zoom. So that's been completed. And then, we made the updates to the website and offered up for, through the DEO, communicate with the candidates to offer up to be able to do a bio and photo to be included in the website. It's an option. It's not a matter requirement anyway, but, that's been offered up to us. So the sample ballot has been put together by the, DEO. We just sent it to me, so I need to send it to legal counsel just for final review to make sure it's good to go. And then they'll go back and then they'll start with the process there. So he's working through, has connected with the registrar of voters to get the first, request for property owners and registered voters and start to do that work to put that together. So, so everything's kind of moving down the track from there. And we'll be continuing to just work along with the dates go on. So May 2nd, here, polling place election.
Have you guys talked about whether you're gonna count on the site,
They are going to count. He's going to count.
the judges that we hired?
That's what I would imagine. Yeah, that's kind of let him handle that part of it. We did talk about doing the count on site, and so he's working through now. I'm starting to identify election judges through that process. So I'm just going to get ahead of the curve there. So, and the plan now, as it stands, we talked about printing 500 ballots with the ability to make or print more here. See savings on that one last time.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Next, we have time on then,
A reconsideration.
yes,
Attendant. Yes.
do we need any discussion on it?
I think we'd probably start with a motion.
Yeah, if we don't have any discussion. I'm updating your status for the meeting. Okay,
Well, do we do a motion? Should
yeah,
be motion second and then discussion and then vote? Yeah. Yeah.
I make a motion then that we reconsider and approve Steve Sarno's unexcused absence from the special meeting March 1st of 2023 and change that status from unexcused to excused. All those in favor, aye?
Oh, yeah, no, discuss.
Well,
It's just because he didn't know, no one told him.
Yeah, and on that day, I realized that like the day of that I didn't send the agenda out to the board. Didn't email that agenda, posted it all, but it didn't email the agenda to the board, so.
so due to extending circumstances is why we would be.
Can use it, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, and were we gonna then approve the minutes
Nope.
then with changes?
No, it's not that, those minutes happen, it's gonna get recorded in these minutes.
Okay, that's right, the way we were doing it before.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we have a second? Christine was second.
Jason second.
Jason second. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so then we're gonna back up and go into executive session. So I motion that we go to executive session pursuant to 24-6-402 for CRS for specific contract negotiations about pay benefits, etc. for the fire chief contract pursuant to 24-6-402 for ECRS. Do I have a second? All those in favor? Aye. At 5:52. Thank you. Continue. Okay, I motion that we adjourn our executive session and convene in our regular board meeting at 6:18. Do I have a second?
Second.
Christine seconds. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Welcome back. Our executive session was as stated to negotiate pay benefits, etc. for the chief's annual contract. So we need to motion to accept that contract as. Yep. I motion that we accept the contract as negotiated in the executive session. Jason seconds. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And it's
Thank you.
available.
Yeah, as soon as we, so we will, based off of the handwritten edits, we'll create a final version. And then, President Pettit and I will sign those, and then once it's available, once that's done, it's available as a, to a public document. Yep.
Okay. Other.
I have nothing from staff.
The only thing I have is I'd like to officially thank the firefighters for their input in order to accomplish doing an evaluation for the chief this year. There was a lot of great input received, and we did take it very much to heart. I think it was a good, healthy exchange of gives us a little bit more insight as to what happens beyond that door. Other than that, if you would pass that on to staff.
The employees appreciate the board's request, but that's an olive branch, and I think it goes a long way with Lang. So thank you.
Yeah. Other than that, I have no other. Calendar items.
So the only thing I had on here again, and I'll bring it up now for this meeting is, and a decision doesn't need to be made today at this meeting, but just consideration for potentially moving the June 14th meeting to June 21st. Right now, tentatively, I'm going to be out of town on the 14th. I think it's going to play that way. And just for in full transparency too, it would in theory probably be the first meeting for newly seated board members. I think it's better to not move it earlier, but because we may not have everything finalized in time to be able to do it. Looking into it, there's no statutory issues that I can see at this point, and I can check for that would cause an issue if we did it 1 week later than what we have it tentatively scheduled. So I can,
And finances, that would be a little bit of finance.
Earlier.
yeah, 7.
Yeah, we don't want to.
No.
You get the poor guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's good.
We want to make a a decision now, or do you want to wait? Just,
I'm good.
just,
See that
just do a
left
motion.
Garrison.
We're open, yeah, so we can do a motion in a second just to change that. And then, if you wouldn't mind adding the motion just to update all of our posting locations for that. And then I'll notify everybody and I'll update our calendar and the online, because we post all the dates online on the calendar ahead of time, so people can, they can look at the, they can look at the website right now and
Yeah.
see the dates for the whole rest of the year, so I'll update all that stuff, so.
I might not be here, but it's more important than you here.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I motion that we move June 14th regular,
Yep. Happy pension and regular pay.
pension. Okay, and back up.
Yep.
I motion that we move June 14th pension board meeting and regular board meeting to the date of June 21st. And in addition, update all public postings as to the date change. Second. Christine seconds. All those in favor, aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Notice, next board meeting will be April 12th, 2023 at Station 16 at 4 o'clock. At 4:03.
That's
Anyway, if there's no further business, I motion that we adjourn this meeting at 6:24. Do I have a second?
I'll say.
Are you sure? You want to have any discussion? Okay.
All those in favor, aye. Opposed? No one ever opposed.
No, I never did.
Cap, are
Thank
you
you.
still recording?
Thank you.
Once you go, I'll let the board know.
But May. 10.